First of all, I must say something that I think is very crucial to all this, though one doesn't valorize any one person. But there was Vivan in everything that was done, and I don't want to make him sound like though he was the main person, only person, but his interests and instincts and his things informed the process of. So this workshop that it was Vivan who initiated the idea that we do something in Germany along with German artists. He made contacts, he made various people, and talked amongst his friends, all of us, and so it was quite an unusual thing at that time to go outside one of these ICCR kind of delegations, but to go as a group of artist friends and to make new artist friends and to do some work together. So I think in that way it was for me quite it was quite a point in my career which made me think in different ways and made lasting impressions. By that time we felt we were meeting old friends. So it was like taking them to Baroda and seeing the kind of their interactions with the Faculty of Fine Arts, with individual artists. And there was always a lot of fun and games around that, even though it was an educational institution where they were coming and speaking. And but by that time, like I said, we had become friends. And working together was in Kusori later. It was very special because there would be, especially to be informed about, especially in the, working together was one pleasure, but also spending evenings together when we would discuss the work and look at each other's substantial body of each other's works and then kind of recognize what the work was about. And I mean, like, there was an artist like Johannes Bruce Inke. Now, it was quite interesting to see that Inge was considered to be a solitary person out there in Germany, because there were not many women sculptors who worked physically themselves to create things. And this was it was a little bit of a different kind of situation where we had already people like Pilu Pochkanwala and many other sculptors, Leela Mukherjee, others, so we had recognized that women could in their own right be sculpted. So it was nice to see that she was greatly encouraged by that instead of only the other way around. I mean, most of the time we were inspired by their work ethics and their work, but there was reciprocal, I think, very much.
There was a very big show that the British Council, you would know about it. British Council brought a show called about figurative art. What it was called. It was shown in the Lalit Kala Academy. It was a very big show of major figurative artists, and there was some discussion. And I happened to know Teresa Gledo, who worked in the British Council. So she said, would you be interested in a British artist? So I said, yeah. She said, don't ask for a Hockney or a Bacon, but whoever you ask, we'll see if they wish to come. So I remembered, I didn't know him too well in the Slade. I was in the postgraduate, and he was doing the basic sculpture course for John Davis. Now she said John Davis has hardly left his studio outside of London and hardly travels. I don't know whether he'll agree to come. But he got the invitation. He was thrilled to come, and that was the first foreign artist that came. It was interesting that same year we got Dhruv Mistry, who was on his way to make it in England, Royal Academy, etc. So there was a very interesting thing, because John Davis draws in a very almost naive manner. And Room Mystery had this flourish that, he's a Leonardo, he can draw as well. So they used to sort of slightly compete. And John said, but drawing, to do a finished drawing and a fine drawing is not my agenda. So it was interesting that a very good dialogue was set up between both of them, and they drew sketches. So this relationship with other artists, earlier on, there wasn't that much of it between one artist speaking to the other. Each, did their own work, and the spaces were small and informal. So they would set up this, easel or whatever it is on the ground, and make their drawings and their paintings. So it was mainly art that was pictorial, which was either on canvas or on paper. It's only by the time the sculptors came that it shifted the ground and it positioned a new direction in art. I approached Max Müller, and I said I want to get a German artist. They said, sure, propose a name. So because we were always interested to look for a figurative artist, but at that time there was a lot of what was called a kind of zeitgeist, a new expressionism, and that somehow didn't seem to be something that we would want to relate, at least the generation of figurative artists that Bhupen, Ghulam, etc. So then I asked my sister Navina, who lived in Hamburg, that broadly, can you think of some figurative artists who are interested in different historical aspects, maybe even other cultural aspects, not just coming from German expressionism. So she homed in on Arvid Gorella and sent me images of his work. So she got a phone call. She phoned him, and he couldn't believe that this Indian could speak German so well, and I've got an invitation to India. Now Arvid was a well-known figurative artist in Berlin, but he was already interested in art from elsewhere, and he was including it in his work. So he seemed the right sort of person, and he had an interest in history and different things. So it really worked out perfectly when he came, and he couldn't believe the atmosphere, the informality, the charm of the place. And he said, I would like to suggest a colleague of mine, Siegfried Neuenhausen, who's a very dynamic artist. He was secretary of this artist union, and I think he's a sculptor. So I said, good, after a painter, a sculptor. So that's how Siegfried came. And then when he came, he said, it's terrific, and in his own German way, he said, now it's got to be an Indo-German Artists Workshop, and I will raise the funds that you all come to Germany. And then Arvid led the group, because his love for Italian art was, just extraordinary. Ghulam, because he would go every summer, like so many German, people go, and particularly, artists go to Italy. It becomes the sort of second home, and it's also warm. And he knew from the back of his hand which church to go into, which monastery, which, this Giotto thing is there. And then, of course, he loved food. So in Italy, there are small homes where they set up a table of this size, and you can have invite 10 or 12 people, and you have to tell them that 10 or 12 people are coming. So he knew all that. So he said, the group is coming. And there was only, apart from him, one other German artist, but basically he was the one, and then the 6 of us, 7 of us. So it was, again the return hospitality, the openness was there, and we traveled around. But we also went to the art school in Braunschweig, where there were some very important artists, and then we were given studios, and some of the German artists were working there. And before that, had managed to get some galleries to show Indian art. So I made this group and each of them contributed. So the two sort of worked in tandem of a international relation, but Indian art is being presented. And then the dialogue part of it, of being in the same space or the same institution. And Braunschweig was, I mean, it was not famous as Dusseldorf and Joseph Beuys, but it had a good tradition and some good artists. So it set the tone for the German artists. The next was, of course, you have Germans, French and Indian. So we got approached the French and there was a very wonderful cultural counselor called Vincent Grimaud, and he said, sure, I'll find you some artist, and he named somebody called Bernard Monino, who was quite young, but he had already made quite a name for himself for doing quite not mystical, but he was interested in sort of stellar space and a bit like Jitish Kalat, and did kind of diagrammatic works, and was already got a name for himself. So he came and he was very charming. He said, can I bring a friend? She was an artist. So they were also very easy and free. And if you can see Shamshad, boxing with him and doing, seeing who's stronger. So there's a lot of the very informal and easy exchanges of laughter or drinking, and everybody, artists put their guards down there, no problem in any way. So that was Monino, and then next came Siegfried, and then next came the Indo-German Artists Workshop. So that more or less set the maximum relationship with artists from abroad. Peter Nagel was a sort of figurative artist, and so his language was familiar to one. But there were two artists who actually were broadly from the Dusseldorf, Joseph Beuys school, and how works were, changing. The senior artist was Hinnerk Schrader. He used to do a lot of land art. He would just go in his car and go to a site, and he would then literally, pitch a tent. Means he would make a sculpture out of a tent, which he does in Kasoli. So the relationship of a very, like a camper going and finding some wood and putting it together and making a structure, whether over a stream or in the landscape. And like everybody did, they photographed it. If Richard Long went, then he would walk, and then the walk would be photographed, the path that he cut. So the relationship between the performative aspect of sculpture, of leaving it from big monumental thing, Hinnerk represented that school, and he was a wonderful person. He drew very well. He spoke English quite well. So he was very, very accessible, charming to the group. The other charmer was Johannes Bruce, who did very interesting photography, where he actually put the photographic paper and exposed it, and would put different kinds of, I don't know exactly what chemicals he did, but he spoiled the surface and created a kind of abstract imagery. Sometimes he would actually put an object, and the object would throw a shadow on it, so you'd get the trace of the object as a shadow. So it was a kind of constructed photography, where it wasn't a photograph shot through a camera. So that coincided with, it affected me in some way, in a different sense, but he represented that. And then there was Ingemann, who was a sculptor and who worked very much in the environment, and so she saw these steps and said I'll make somewhere between people are seated geometrically, and you must have seen photographs of them with plaster of Paris, and built about, I think, almost 20 of these figure chairs, on the same positioning of the stone, the way that I'd cut the hillside to make it a seat, as well as with a back. So it's very steep, as you've seen, Gayatri, and then you look down, into a pit. So that relationship, to the environment, I mean environmental sculpture, also communicated. We didn't understand exactly, what that meant, or what just making some plaster of Paris, geometric forms on this, but it communicated, and it was a very beautiful counterpoint with Hinak's structure, where he then put, because he was also interested in nature, so he put, sort of twig of a tree. So the way that this structure floated in the wind, and Ingerman's solid pieces. So these then, gave us the idea that there is environmental sculpture. It can be done very freely, very informally, with poor materials, a kind of arte povera position. And I think that had definitely, an impact to people much later, maybe, but that was, the agenda set by the German artists.
It was my first visit to anywhere abroad. So it was an absolute, what can one say? I mean, apart from the fact that one was seeing original works of art for the first time, uh, it was also the fact that one was seeing life as it was lived in the West for the first time, talking to people, not only the artists who were participating, but others around in the college or on the streets and things like that. So it was it it's changed it changed one's perspective on, you know and it brought that whole the tradition that one was relating to, the 500 year, like from pre-Renaissance up to the 50s and 60s and modern art. So one was relating to it. One understood it very well. One knew most of it. When the Germans were very surprised of how much we knew about Western art. So most of us were very, very familiar with artists and things like that. But to be there, you know, to be there and see that life and things like that. That experience was absolutely great. I still remember the first evening when we were at mm, in this place with one's friend, in this the I think Siegfried's friend had this place in near Arezzo. And the first morning after we reached there, and we got up, and I was like just looking at the hills and that landscape, and it was like standing in front of Piero della Francesca painting. The way in which the trees were distributed on that hill, and the way in which the sun was coming on, and it was like I can only say like almost like a spiritual experience. So, and lots of things. I mean, first time you see Elijah was someone that I had loved for so long, and then seeing all that, their endless exposure to Picasso and all that. And in Kasauli also, it was, uh, I mean, they were, all of them were extremely friendly and extremely, some of them were with families. Peter Nagel, for example, was with family and sitting on Amrita's carpet, which everyone just kind of, you know. And then there used to be Joaquin, who is very particular about things lying around. Yeah. So in the party, everyone's glasses used to be lying around and things. Joaquin was the one that every like 20 minutes or half an hour used to get up and kind of clear up everyone's. So all that, I mean, there's so many things.